Man age 62, PSA 6.4. Urologist recommends monitoring possible biopsy if continues rising. Man asks, before biopsy, can I try lifestyle changes? Doctor skeptical but agrees. 8 weeks. If PSA still rising, we proceed with biopsy. Man changes 7 daily habits. No medication, no supplements, just behavioral modifications. 8 weeks later, repeat PSA test. Result, 4.1. PSA dropped from 6.4 to 4.1. Drop of 2.3 points. Doctor surprised. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. We'll monitor, but biopsy not needed now. What did he change? 7 specific daily habits known to increase prostate inflammation. Study from Journal of Urology. Men who modified inflammatory lifestyle habits experienced average PSA reduction of 1.8 points over 12 weeks. Research from prostate cancer and prostatic diseases. Chronic inflammation in prostate tissue causes sustained PSA elevation even without cancer. When inflammation reduced, PSA often decreases correspondingly. 7 daily habits consistently linked to increased prostate inflammation and PSA elevation. Today, all 7 habits. The mechanisms connecting each to PSA, the specific changes that reduce inflammation, and the timeline for seeing PSA response. Now, before we move on, a critical reminder, this video is for educational purposes only. It's not medical advice, and lifestyle changes do not treat prostate cancer. If you have cancer or significantly elevated PSA, you need medical evaluation and treatment. These habits address inflammation that can elevate PSA, not cancer itself. Always work with your doctor on PSA management. And if you'd like a free PSA lowering habits guide, just comment the word habits below. You'll find the link waiting in the pinned comment. It's a simple guide showing what to stop, what to start, and the anti-inflammatory alternatives. Now, let's cover the 7 habits that may be keeping your PSA elevated. Habit number 1, diet high in saturated fat from red meat, processed meat, and full-fat dairy. Study from American Journal of Clinical Nutrition examined dietary patterns and PSA levels in men without prostate cancer. Finding: men consuming highest amounts of saturated fat had PSA levels average 1.7 points higher than men consuming lowest amounts. Why does saturated fat raise PSA? Saturated fat triggers inflammatory response, increases production of inflammatory markers including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. Research from Journal of Nutrition. High saturated fat meals increased inflammatory markers by 43% within 6 hours of consumption. These same inflammatory markers correlate with PSA elevation. Study from Prostate Journal. Men with elevated CRP levels had PSA average 1.4 points higher than men with normal CRP. The connection: saturated fat, systemic inflammation, prostate inflammation, PSA elevation. Foods highest in saturated fat: red meat, especially fatty cuts, processed meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, full-fat dairy including cheese, butter, whole milk, fried foods cooked in saturated fats. The modification: reduce red meat to once or twice weekly. Choose lean cuts when you do eat it. Replace processed meats with fish, poultry, or plant proteins. Switch from full-fat dairy to low-fat versions. Use olive oil instead of butter. Research from Nutrition and Cancer. Men who switched from high-saturated fat diet to Mediterranean-style diet experienced average PSA reduction of 1.2 points over 16 weeks. Timeline for PSA response: 8 to 12 weeks of consistent dietary change. Important: this doesn't mean never eat red meat. It means shifting from daily consumption to occasional consumption. Your prostate responds to chronic inflammatory patterns, not single meals. Habit number 2, regular alcohol consumption, especially 3 or more drinks daily. Study from Alcohol and Alcoholism measured PSA changes in relation to alcohol intake. Finding: men consuming 21 or more drinks weekly had PSA levels average 1.3 points higher than men consuming fewer than 7 drinks weekly. Why alcohol raises PSA? Alcohol directly irritates prostate tissue, creates inflammatory response in prostate. Additionally, alcohol increases estrogen levels in men, Elevated estrogen associated with prostate inflammation. Research from prostate cancer and prostatic diseases. Alcohol consumption correlated with increased prostate inflammation markers on biopsy samples. The pattern: occasional drink, minimal PSA effect. Daily drinking, especially multiple drinks, sustained elevation. The modification: limit alcohol to 7 drinks or fewer per week. Ideally, no more than 1 to 2 drinks on any single day. If currently drinking 3 or more daily, reduce gradually. Cut to 2 daily for 2 weeks, then 1 daily, then several alcohol-free days weekly. Study from Journal of Urology. Men who reduced alcohol from daily consumption to occasional consumption experienced average PSA decrease of 0.9 points over 12 weeks. Timeline: 6 to 10 weeks after reducing consumption. Habit number 3. High intake of dairy products, especially whole milk and cheese. Research on dairy and PSA shows mixed results, but subset of men appear sensitive. Study from American Journal of Epidemiology. Men consuming 3 or more servings of dairy daily had PSA levels 12% higher than men consuming less than 1 serving daily. Why dairy might raise PSA in some men? Dairy increases IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. IGF-1 stimulates cell growth, including prostate cells. Some research suggests dairy creates mild inflammatory response in susceptible individuals. Additionally, high calcium intake from dairy may affect vitamin D metabolism. Low vitamin D associated with prostate inflammation. The modification: reduce to 1 or fewer dairy servings daily. Choose low-fat or non-fat versions when you do consume dairy. Consider plant-based alternatives: almond milk, oat milk, cashew cheese. Study from nutrition research. Men who eliminated or drastically reduced dairy experienced average PSA reduction of 0.7 points over 16 weeks. Important nuance: not all men PSA sensitive to dairy, but if you consume 3+ servings daily and have elevated PSA, worth testing elimination for 8 to 12 weeks. Timeline: 10 to 16 weeks for PSA response if dairy sensitive. Habit number 4. Sitting 8 or more hours daily without movement breaks. Study from Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. Men who sat 8+ hours daily had PSA levels average 1.6 points higher than men who sat less than 4 hours. Why sitting raises PSA? Prolonged sitting creates pelvic congestion, blood pools in pelvic region. Reduced circulation means reduced oxygen delivery to prostate. Hypoxic, poorly circulated tissue becomes inflamed. Additionally, sitting compresses prostate against pelvic floor. Chronic compression causes mechanical irritation and inflammation. Research from Journal of Physical Activity and Health. Breaking up sitting time with 5-minute movement breaks every hour reduced inflammatory markers 31% over 8 weeks. Same study measured PSA subset. Average decrease 0.8 points in men who implemented hourly breaks. The modification: stand and move 5 minutes every hour during workday. Take walking breaks. Stretch. Climb stairs. Any movement that gets blood flowing. If possible, use standing desk part of day. Alternate sitting and standing. After work, avoid immediately sitting on couch. Take walk. Do light activity. Study from European Journal of Applied Physiology. Men who added 30 minutes of daily walking to break up sedentary time experienced average PSA reduction of 0.9 points over 12 weeks. Timeline: 8 to 12 weeks of consistent movement pattern changes. Habit number 5. Frequent cycling, especially rides over 30 miles or 90 minutes. Research from Clinical Journal of Sport Medicine. Regular cyclists had PSA levels average 1.4 points higher than non-cyclists when tested within 48 hours of ride. Why cycling raises PSA? Bicycle seat puts direct pressure on prostate. Prolonged pressure creates mechanical trauma. Trauma triggers inflammatory response. Inflammation persists 48 to 72 hours after ride. Study of competitive cyclists. Average PSA 5.2 when tested day after long ride. Same men tested after 1 week no cycling. Average PSA 3.6. The modification: If you cycle regularly and have elevated PSA, try 4-week cycling break. Retest PSA. If cycling is important exercise for you, invest in prostate-friendly saddle with cutout design. Limit rides to under 60 minutes. Stand frequently during ride to relieve pressure. Alternative: switch to swimming, elliptical, or walking for primary cardio. Less prostate impact. Timeline: PSA often drops within 2 to 4 weeks of reducing cycling frequency or duration. Important: this doesn't mean cycling causes prostate cancer. It means mechanical pressure creates inflammation that temporarily or persistently elevates PSA. Habit number 6: inadequate daily water intake leading to chronic mild dehydration. Study from Urology examined hydration status and PSA levels. Finding: men drinking less than 4 cups water daily had PSA average 0.7 points higher than men drinking 8 or more cups daily. Why dehydration raises PSA? Insufficient water intake creates concentrated urine. Concentrated urine more irritating to urinary tract and prostate. Chronic irritation creates chronic inflammation. Additionally, dehydration reduces blood flow throughout body, including to prostate. Reduced circulation promotes inflammation. The modification: drink 8 to 10 cups of water daily, spread throughout day, not all at once. Monitor urine color, should be pale yellow. Dark yellow indicates dehydration. Study from Journal of Urology. Men who increased water intake from inadequate to adequate levels experienced average PSA decrease of 0.5 points over 8 weeks. Timeline: 6 to 10 weeks of consistent, adequate hydration. Simple intervention, significant cumulative effect when combined with other changes. Habit number 7: chronic stress combined with inadequate or poor quality sleep. Research from psychoneuroendocrinology. Men with high stress and poor sleep had inflammatory markers 52% higher than men with low stress and good sleep. Same inflammatory markers correlated with PSA elevation. Study from Journal of Clinical Endocrinology. Men sleeping less than 6 hours nightly had PSA average 1.1 points higher than men sleeping 7 to 8 hours. Why stress and poor sleep raise PSA? Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Sustained high cortisol promotes systemic inflammation. Poor sleep disrupts immune function. Impaired immunity allows inflammation to persist. Together, they create inflammatory environment affecting entire body, including prostate. Research from Brain, Behavior, and Immunity. Stress reduction techniques combined with sleep improvement reduced inflammatory markers by 38% over 12 weeks. The modification: implement stress management. Daily practice, meditation, deep breathing, yoga, or other relaxation technique. Prioritize sleep, 7 to 8 hours nightly. Consistent sleep schedule. Dark, cool room. No screens hour before bed. Study from prostate cancer and prostatic diseases. Men who improve sleep quality from poor to good experienced average PSA reduction of 0.8 points over 16 weeks. Timeline: 12 to 16 weeks. Stress and sleep effects on inflammation are gradual. The cumulative effect: study from Nutrition and Cancer examined men who modified multiple habits simultaneously. One habit changed, average 0.6 point PSA reduction. 3 habits changed, average 1.4 point reduction. 5 or more habits changed, average 2.2 point reduction. More habits you address, greater the PSA response. Critical points to understand. Point 1. These changes address inflammation, not prostate cancer. If you have cancer, lifestyle changes are complementary to medical treatment, not replacement. Point 2. PSA reduction from habit changes indicates inflammation reduction. This is beneficial for overall health regardless of PSA effect. Point 3. Not everyone responds equally. Some men highly sensitive to inflammatory lifestyle factors, others less so. Genetics and individual variation play role. Point 4. Timeline is weeks to months, not days. Inflammation takes time to develop, takes time to resolve. Point 5. Work with your doctor. Share habit changes you're making. Doctor needs context to interpret PSA changes. Realistic expectations. If your PSA is 6.0 from inflammation, addressing habits might drop it to 4.0 or below. If your PSA is 6.0 from cancer, addressing habits might drop it slightly but won't normalize it. You still need cancer treatment. The value. Reducing inflammatory burden benefits your overall health, heart health, metabolic health, cognitive health, prostate health. PSA is one marker. But reducing chronic inflammation has benefits far beyond PSA. Remember, comment habits for your free PSA Lowering Habits Guide. If helpful, tap like and share with men managing elevated PSA. Subscribe because next week we're covering the anti-inflammatory foods that research shows may help lower PSA naturally. 7 habits, all modifiable, all within your control, your daily choices, your inflammatory burden, your PSA response.